Hi, welcome everybody to CEU Executive MBA's New York Open Day. My name is Thomas Lamel. I'm the Senior Program Manager and I will guide you through this evening. I'm very flattered to welcome, I will start with the program presentation, then you'll have the opportunity to talk to one of our current participants. Jason is online. Then we'll have a keynote presentation by Professor Kizlovsky, and in the end, we'll have a Q&A session. Feel free to shoot in your questions in the chat box or by email or direct messaging. I will collect those questions for the end of the Q&A sessions. We would have been in New York. I would have been in New York myself, but unfortunately there's a pandemic going on and I'm quarantined. So I'm sorry I cannot be with you guys, but it shouldn't be a problem to deliver this whole open day on Zoom and with our alumni Lenny Moore on site in New York with our partners Advantage Austria in Manhattan. Thank you very much. Let's get started. The problem you're facing right now during this pandemic is the question if an MBA is still worth it. Because you don't have to go very far these days to encounter that we're witnessing fundamental transformations in the world in a century. In 2008, we've had a big financial crisis. In 2015, we have seen a large refugee crisis. And right now we are witnessing the biggest pandemic in a century. And these changes are part of a much broader set of transformation that is taking place. And some of them are positive and some of them are pretty dangerous. So the key question is, how do we as business professionals, how do you as business professionals prepare for this challenging and unpredictable environment? And the next obvious question is an MBA the way to do it? We have seen an explosion of online education, and I'll show you why I believe our executive MBA is worth it. So if you're interested in further education, you usually start by reaching out for the stars, looking at the best business schools in the world, which happen to be in the United States, close to New York City, most of them. What you tend to find is mostly a very mission-driven MBA curriculum, a very differentiated curriculum, which offers a certain expertise and perspective. Because of their full-time format, their student body is international and the faculty is actually very international of the teaching faculty. The student body is international, but you're leaving the labor market for 1 or 2 years, which is another financial burden. And these business schools, the best business schools in the world, like Harvard or Columbia in New York City, are very expensive, like starting at tuition rates of $120,000 or even more. And you might have to relocate your family to the new MBA location. So if you contrast this to local programs, if you're looking for programs that might be cheaper in your region, in your area, what you tend to find is mostly a pretty vanilla, pretty standard MBA curriculum. The faculty who are teaching, who are delivering the program are mostly local, and so is the number of international students is very low. Some programs, even though they might not be top ranked, they might be second tier, like Baruch College or Albany University, they might still be quite expensive at $55,000 or even more at $80,000. So it's not really a bargain to attend these schools. So what do we at CEU is to offer you the best of two worlds. There is no work disruption because thanks to the practical format and the flexible modular format of the program, I will talk about it later. And our executive MBA mission, the executive MBA for the open world, is very much mission driven. I will talk about this philosophy later. Tuition at CEU Executive MBA is only $33,000. Comparing to the programs that I already mentioned before, I think that's a pretty good competitive deal. We have an international student body because of the modularity program of the program. Actually, we are the second most international university in the world, according to the Times Higher Education. So participants can fly in, can fly out, which is a major advantage of the program. I would like to introduce you to some of our faculty. For example, Mark Kaufman, who is an expert in applied theory with a PhD from Harvard. Or Professor Isusenius, an expert on marketing and especially emotional marketing with a PhD from the University of Florida. The course on big data and artificial intelligence will be taught by Professor Miklos Koren, one of the leading scholars in this field, with the Harvard PhD. For leadership, Austin Lee Nichols, our world-class psychologist with executive education experience on 4 continents, he will lead the way. If you're new to finance, Joy is a uniquely gifted educator. Generation after generation of our students tell us how she's just unique in explaining complex financial concepts. And if you're already experienced in finance, you'll be placed in the advanced track course with Adam Zawodowski, a leading expert on complex investments with a PhD from Princeton. Sophia Barani, an expert on the future of work, like artificial intelligence, etc., with a PhD from LSE London. And for strategy, you'll have Yusuf Akbar, who has taught in more than 40 countries and advises leading Fortune 500 companies. So where are we? Because we are registered in New York State and Vienna, and I want to introduce Vienna to you. Vienna is just a flight of 8 hours away from New York. We've done some research on coach and first class tickets. So a round trip ticket to Vienna is only 600 euro, and business class or first class tickets are at 2,000. If you added this travel cost to your tuition, you would even have a better deal joining CEU Executive MBA than attending at American universities at the East Coast. And speaking of Vienna, Vienna has been dominating the world's most livable city rankings in over a decade now. It has just been described as the most exciting city in 2022 by Bloomberg. It has been chosen as one of the best cities for 2022 and is considered one of the most cultivated destinations on the continent by The Independent. And as I already said, it dominates the rankings of the most livable cities in the world. It is the center of international diplomacy and business. The United Nations are based in Vienna, the OSCE is based in Vienna, the International Atomic Energy as organization or UNIDO are based in Vienna, and so are many, many European and American headquarters entering the CEE market from Vienna. So here's what the program looks like. As I already said, it's a modular format. It's a 10-module program. The dates you can see on the screen right now are not going to change. So you can basically plan your studying around professional and family activities based on these dates. As you can see, we have 3 modules in the first year. It's the row on the top. 4 modules in the second year, it's the center row, and 3 in the third year, which gives you flexibility and balance in your life. In the summers, which is the center column, our bespoke and cutting-edge leadership program takes place in Budapest, and you'll have the opportunity to benefit from electives from the faculty in the world we invite to teach your classes. So eventually, there will come the day when you finish with us and you will join the CEU alumni from around the world network. As I already said, CEU is the second most international university in the world, and this is a network, an active elite network on every continent. We have city-level chapters, we have country-level chapters. Basically, wherever you are in the world or wherever you go in the world, you will find CEU alumni to interact with. The network is a network that you can count on and one of the key assets that we have. There are more than 18,000 alumni professionals all over the world just waiting for you to mingle. So the question is, how are we even able to offer such a high quality program at only $33,000 of tuition? The answer is pretty simple and lies in our founder and benefactor, George Soros, who created CEU with the mission to promote open society. Just recently, George Soros made a further contribution to CEU, to CEU's mission, by offering another $1 billion in endowment to create the Open Society University Network, which means we are the best endowed university in Europe. So I already mentioned that we are very much mission driven. I already mentioned the Open Society and that the Executive MBA is our Executive MBA is the EMBA for the open world. But what does the Executive MBA for the open world mean? What makes CEU so unique? First of all, when we talk about open world, we mean skepticism towards dogmas, towards hierarchies and privileges, both in context of how we teach, but also in composition of the cohorts. Diversity is key to creating a successful program. And for us, it's not just an empty marketing catchphrase. Secondly, we believe in debate and radical rational thinking. Every idea can be challenged because we believe in facts and arguments rather than narratives and fake news. Because it's narratives that create the polarization in our societies that we see on social media every day. And we believe the best way to challenge this narrative-based discourse is to make arguments based on facts and realities, which is the hallmark of Karl Popper's definition of open societies. We are fundamentally opposed to all kinds of discrimination, and we actively promote diversity within our program. And the way we finance the scholarship means we create opportunities for people who traditionally have not been able to actually join programs like ours. And what distinguishes us from other universities is also that we see managers not just as people who deal with businesses or resources, but we also believe that managers go beyond that. They are positive change agents. Whatever their profession is, whatever their cultural or professional background is, they can make a change in the world. So what does the CEU Executive MBA classroom look like? Currently, we have 65 managers with an average of 14 years of work experience, including a minimum of 3 years of leadership or managerial experience. As you can see from the background image, we use state-of-the-art classroom technology and setups in order to facilitate lively discussion and interaction in class. We make use of case-based learning rather than traditional lectures that you would find in local MBA programs, because we want to take you, experts in your specific field, whatever your professional background is, whatever your job is, from this level of functional expertise to the strategic level. We are offering a top quality online experience. If you want to join online in times of a pandemic, this could be an attractive option for you. If traveling is inconvenient for you, if you're not able to travel, if you don't want to travel, or if you have underlying health conditions, you can easily opt in for online education and join the specific modules online or do the whole program online. It's up to you. And we have invested heavily in studio grade microphones, capturing both the lecturers and the participants. Because for us, education is not just a one-way street going from the lecturer to the student, to the participant, but also from the participant, from you to the lecturer, and among fellows. We have invested in large screens and high quality cameras. We have created physical virtual breakout rooms for support teams. We have created personalized virtual backgrounds that you can see on the left picture. And we offer high quality individual support on every level of your journey with us, from the level of just inquiring with us about the program, to actually applying for the program, to enrolling to the program, of being a current participant or becoming an alumni. We offer high quality individual support to you. And just to give you an explanation of some context of what's going on in the picture on the left, it's just an example of an online session that we had of our support teams. The support teams are for group work, for group projects, and you will be in a support team. You will be very much exposed to diversity because we are handpicking those support teams, and you will not be placed in a group with people coming from the same industry, coming from the same country, or the same language. So we proactively expose you to diversity, because when you are when you are facing different learning techniques, different solution-making processes, different decision-making processes, this is where the learning kicks in. And we want to actively engage you in this process. The color codes is just of these support teams are just a symbol of the support teams of which support teams the people belong to. So as I already said, tuition is €29,000 or $33,000 for the whole program and includes all credits. As I said, we offer online options. So if you want to do specific modules online or the whole program online, that's fine for us. If traveling is inconvenient for you, or if you're not able to travel, there's always an online option. However, just as a side note, we encourage everybody to attend on site because it's just a better learning experience, just to be honest about it. Because learning is more than just joining an online session. It's more than just watching a video on accounting on YouTube. It's also the part that is taking place before and after your classes. It's about, it's about having lunch together. It's about it's about having a dinner together. It's about, group work on site and engaging in those social activities that are not directly part of the module. We have, in order to defray your other costs, we have special rates. We've negotiated discount rates with partner airlines and partner hotels. We have negotiated discount rates with partner hotels in Budapest and Vienna, ranging from the budget level to the luxury level. And we have negotiated travel arrangements for flights with Lufthansa Group and Austrian Airlines to bring you to Europe. So we invite you to join the open world. The application deadline is March 27th, and the application starts online on our website. I strongly encourage everybody to apply as soon as possible because we have a first come, first served policy as far as applications are concerned. And the sooner you apply, the sooner you can reserve your study seat. If you have any questions, if you want to discuss financial support, if you want to discuss the application process, or if you need advice on how to tweak your application, feel free to book a one-on-one consultation with me through the website. I'd be happy to discuss your options and give you advice on your application. And I think it's one thing to hear about the program from us, from the executive from the CEU Executive MBA Program Office, but it's an sorry, but it's another thing to hear about the program from people who are actually doing the program right now, and that's why we invited Jason tonight. Jason, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate. If you could just briefly introduce yourself, like what is your profession, what is your academic background, and why you chose CEU Executive MBA back then.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tomas. My name is Jason Clevenger. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I am based in the United States. I'm an American. I live in Chicago. So I am making that travel that Tomas alluded to earlier. My background is in consulting. I'm a social impact consultant. So I'm working in a consulting firm, servicing the public sector, primarily the US federal government, as well as the organizations that the USG serves in the community development space. And on the side, I'm also involved in some social entrepreneurship projects, as well as in the NGO sector. And you know, the CEU EMBA for the open world was just a really solid fit given my professional background and where I want to go. And that's why I was so interested in it.
I think you're a pretty good representative because you, no, seriously, because you show diversity that we have in the program. Like most MBA programs, I mean, they're business degrees, attract people coming from consultancies and investment banking, but we are attractive to people coming from I would call it the non-traditional MBA market, like NGOs, the public sector, or civil rights movement, because we have a high reputation in that field. CEU has been established in order to accompany countries in the CEE country area after the turmoil of the Soviet Union, in order to help them with the transition to democratic societies, building up open societies. And this is like where our brand and our reputation really lies. So we not only have people coming from the traditional corporate world, but also coming from NGOs and civil rights movements around the world. And I think this adds up to the diversity in class that you already mentioned. If you could tell us something about the cohort that you are in. I mean, give us just an example of who are you in class with?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely, to your point earlier, I was definitely attracted to CEU because of the commitment to open society, and also because I knew it was not this, I was going to get a diverse experience from folks. So, in my own support group, we were talking about support groups earlier. I've got folks that have worked in aviation, have worked in manufacturing, have worked in IT, but within our cohort, there are people that are running NGOs and running nonprofits and doing LGBTQIA+ rights that are involved in civil society organizations. So it's a broad array of not just sort of like lived experience and geographic representation and language, but also that professional experience. And that leads to some really incredible conversations that you have in class, on WhatsApp, in meet and greets that we throw together in our support groups. And it's that level of diversity that is just adding to the quality of my experience. I absolutely love it.
This diversity is empowered by a variety of fellowships that we offer. I mean, I will talk about the fellowships later, or I would be happy to talk about your individual financial needs in a one-on-one consultation. But just to give an example, we have LGBTIQ Fellowships, because as I already said, diversity is part of our DNA. It's not just a token thing for us to do in order to have a colorful, diverse brochure that we could present. It's part of our DNA, and it's where we get our strength from. It's our major asset of the program, to expose you to this diversity, because your industry. You don't want to talk to people from from the same companies, from the same industry, about listening to the same old stories and the same old problems and the same old decision-making techniques. You want to gain new insight and new techniques, and this is where this is like the purpose of diversity, and we guarantee you this diversity. Thank you very much, Jason. I mean, you've basically mentioned, if you could just give us, the last question I would have for you is, if you could just briefly talk about the professors that you have seen so far, like the academic excellence that they have shown. I mean,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, the quality of our instruction is it's top notch. I mean, but it's also in an environment where it's a conversation. You know, you're having conversations with your classmates and also the professors. You're able to challenge them. It's encouraged, you know, so there are interesting conversations, there are debates, and everyone is welcome and involved in co-creating that space within the classroom. So, and that goes for the online participants as well, because all of us are very aware of the situation we're in, and we're making every effort to include folks that are participating virtually, and they're doing it at a level that is as if they were in the classroom. Though definitely be in the classroom if you can do that and you can travel. But the level of instruction is incredible. We saw some of the professors that were coming in earlier in the presentation, and they really respect us. They don't see us as just students. They see us as professionals, as leaders, and they're there not just to support us, but to engage with us in that conversation and that debate.
I think you're making a strong argument, especially, I mean, we're not only welcoming US American guests tonight online, people are joining us from around the world, but especially for US Americans, I think it's a strong argument. Our faculty members, as I already said, are coming from, you know, Ivy League universities like Harvard, Columbia, Princeton, Yale. So you will get the quality that you would find in your, you know, the best American universities, but at lower cost, because we have this huge financial advantage that we are passing on to participants and students with lower tuition. And you would gain a US and EU double degree, which is, I think, a huge advantage. If you want to move to the international level, I think that's a very strong argument. And you're not adding up to your student debt, because that's part of our philosophy and the idea of our founder. We don't want people to, you know, take out additional loans and get deeper and deeper into student debt. I think this is a huge topic in the US, or this has been in a huge topic in the US in recent years. We don't want people to, you know, to get deeper and deeper into student debt. And that's why we are offering a very competitive tuition, but at the same level, at the same quality, at the same academic excellence as Ivy League universities in the US. Jason, thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm sorry, I need to move to the next part of tonight's open day. Thank you so much. But speaking of the program, I would like to introduce you to our keynote speaker, who happens to be the faculty director of CEU Executive MBA, Professor Marcie Kizlovsky, who is the faculty director and an associate professor of law and strategy with a very American university, with a JSD degree from Yale, with an MPA from Princeton and an MBA from INSEAD. He publishes in 3 disciplines in management, law, and political economy, advises governments, international organizations, progressive political movements around the world. He's a frequent contributor to international media, including Politico, Project Syndicate, Foreign Policy, and Wall Street Journal. And Marcie will talk about a very zeitgeisty topic, and his keynote presentation is about entrepreneurship after COVID. Bright future, question mark. Marcie, thanks for joining us tonight. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and good evening, everybody. It's so great to be back in the US, at least virtually. Yes, I think this is an interesting question. You had this chart, Thomas, about the flight, which is shorter than you would think. Yes, I mean, many programs, part-time programs you would choose in the US would have similar commute time from New York City than our program. You know, the picture shows kind of those two you know, those two approaches, and entrepreneurship is an interesting topic when the American approach and the European approach are interestingly contrasted. It's also, let me say, as Thomas mentioned, we are not only in spirit but formally a New York State university. We are registered in New York State and Austria at the same time, and as any good American liberal university, we are very critical of America and want it to be more like Europe. Yes, that's a very very well-established tradition of American universities. In this topic, in the topic of supporting entrepreneurship, of creating ecosystems for entrepreneurship, actually, until very recently, the American narrative is one of the very few topics when Europeans actually want to be like Americans. Yes, on most topics, we do not want to be like America. We don't want to have, you know, guns at every corner, and we don't want to abandon our universal health insurance. But there is this huge tendency, the love narrative, traditionally with Europe about kind of becoming more high energy on American style entrepreneurship. Yeah? I mean, a very recent Europe SME, small medium sized enterprise strategy, called those you know, smaller startup ventures as the backbone of the EU economy. And Angela Merkel, who has just retired as German Chancellor, but of course had probably the most influential person in European economic policy, I mentioned a few years ago, you know, kind of brought up the issue that, you know, don't forget that the governmental support and governmental commitment of European governments to kind of make our environmental ecosystems more attractive is really what makes a difference. Yes, that the conditions for entrepreneurs in Europe, in a European model, are in large part the consequence of governmental policies. And the governmental policies are, until very recently, have been animated by this idea, let's, in this one aspect, become more like the United States and its famous entrepreneurial and innovation clusters. Of course, the trouble is that when you look at actual ecosystems and actual regulator and governmental environments, continental Europe is not doing that great. This is the most accepted, well-known of those rankings of those ecosystems, the World Bank Doing Business rank, and you know, it lists the United States pretty high as a very, you know, business friendly, entrepreneurship friendly environment, and then actually, you know, the German economy, the main EU continental economy, is way down. Yes, at 22, and actually from the continental, except for Scandinavian countries, which are the traditional pinnacle of respect and admiration of American college professors who combine the European social model with actually very good climate for entrepreneurship. You know, the big continental economies are doing pretty badly here. Yes, with Germany 22nd. Actually, Austria is the next one, but still only at 27th place. So there is a, to summarize, there is a narrative of love and the narrative of let's all be like Silicon Valley, but the reality is very different. Or at least that's how it was until very recently. Because what I want to talk about this evening is that in Europe, while US, is so far still almost universally in admiration of, entrepreneurship as an idea. In Europe, recently, over the last few years, a decade or so, a new narrative is emerging. A new narrative is emerging that is basically questioning the wisdom of the love of entrepreneurship. So in other words, a new European narrative, which is still not dominant, but is growing, is kind of saying maybe Europe should see entrepreneurship kind of like it sees all other US originating ideas, which is with a lot of skepticism. Yes, let me give you a few examples of this. Thomas Piketty, perhaps the most influential European economist, calls entrepreneurship basically a dangerous hype, a narrative, a discourse that, in his view, primarily serves as a way for the winners in today's economy to justify any level of inequality whatsoever, while blaming the losers for lacking talent, virtue, and diligence. And then Piketty is a very influential figure here in Europe. Mariana Mazzucato, another very influential economist, calls the kind of policies supporting entrepreneurship the cult of smallness. Yes, why should we be enamored with startups of SMEs just because they are small? I mean, okay, small is cute when it's about puppies, but like, should policies basically focus on the most productive enterprises regardless of their size, and not necessarily on smallness for smallness sake? Yes, or newness? Yes. And I want to just as a side note mention that this skepticism towards entrepreneurship has been, it's not a completely new field, it has been part of intellectual tradition of discussions about entrepreneurship. And this is most well known and most well associated with the intellectual father of the study of entrepreneurship, Joseph Schumpeter, who is known primarily, especially in the US, for his creating this idea or establishing this concept of creative distraction. It's almost now in a popular discourse, in Financial Times or Wall Street Journal, is that the basic idea that entrepreneurs contribute not only by building, but also by destroying and challenging the old ways. Yes, and Schumpeter, more than 100 years ago, expressed this thought as in his famous quote: "It's not the owners of stagecoaches who build new railways." But very interesting is that the same Joseph Schumpeter, who is always, quoted by libertarians for this creative distraction, actually later in life wrote something very different about entrepreneurship. The opposite, actually. Yes, he basically came up with this idea of creative accumulation. And he argued in 1942, 30 years after the creative distraction, that as we inquire into where the progress was most conspicuous, the trail leads to the door of the big business. And the argument he was making is it's the big business that has know-how, that has scale, that is able to create environments for people to be innovative, not startups, not new enterprises, and that benefit of scale and accumulated knowledge outweighs any benefits from this creative distraction dynamics. And actually, if you look at evidence, because that's what we should look at, the evidence even before COVID was kind of mixed, whether it's the creative distraction story or creative accumulation story. Yes, I mean, there were studies in the US actually that show that SMEs, there is no relation between size and employment growth. So that you don't have, then if the narrative that you hear from politics is SMEs are the engine of employment, rigorous academic research suggests maybe not. In terms of productivity, that's more complex because it's difficult. It's the questions how we define productivity. But but there's been a research that shows, I would say, more numerous research that shows on average SMEs are less productive, including a study from Canada and a comparative study of OECD countries. There are some studies that show the other ways, but and also there is a line of research that suggests SMEs are maybe more productive, but also more risky. There is very interesting research on family firms' performance, and actually that would very much support the European kind of model, because it seems that family firms are slightly more effective and more productive, but only if they are large and public. But if they are small and private, they are actually less productive. And also, there is this strong research that suggests that size contingent regulations, Affordable Care Act, yes, exemption for SMEs, the new contested Biden mandates, which went out of the door, but that's how they were designed. And interestingly, French new labor law, which was championed. This is a very good example of this kind of traditional European openness to import American approach to SMEs as kind of an exception to our general skepticism. In France, the labor law includes exemptions for small and medium-sized enterprises, and basically the research suggests that they are not good, that these things are not good. They harm workers and introduce distortions. And this was all before COVID. Yes, and now we have COVID. If we were in a classroom, this would be a moment to, have an interesting discussion about what is your intuition, how does COVID influences that that picture, which is already far from clean cut. Since Thomas is going to kick me out because he wants to go to Q&A session in a few minutes, I am going to much more present here and maybe answer questions at the end. But if your intuition was that COVID would make this picture even less obviously favorable for SMEs, you are right. The early research suggests that SMEs employ 45% of workers, but were responsible for 62% of losses, and that's actually from your country, US data. Mid-sized firms, okay, everybody faced trouble, but more mid-sized firms proportionally stayed healthy than small firms. Very important, because that's a progressive side. I mean, the law of entrepreneurship is almost bipartisan, or has been so far. And the progressive side, the narrative is in the US very much that SMEs lift people because there are no those internal hierarchies. So, maybe it's less prone to replicate those, old boys network, racist, patriarchal networks which big businesses can entrench. Unfortunately, the data suggests that the challenges that disadvantaged and oppressed communities face persist, whether they, are entrepreneurs or not. So the fact that you become an African American entrepreneur doesn't change the underlying systematic racism that you face. Yes, and so, for example, SMEs owned by African Americans and immigrants experienced largest losses. Yes, you can in the pandemic. Women-owned business in Canada fire disproportionately higher percentage of workers than men-owned businesses. Yes, which shows that they face a much tougher employment. That's business environment. Yes, and when you go to the governmental response, the Paycheck Protection Program, which was very much kind of geared towards small businesses, not correlated with either infections or unemployment rates. On the other hand, the German Kurzarbeit program, championed by now the Chancellor, but then the Finance Minister Olaf Scholz, the German bazooka, as it was called, was highly effective. Yes, but it was much more geared towards mid-sized, stable or big companies. Yes, some UK data. Yes. This is individual change, pandemic-related change in individual earnings of employees, of an average employee, depending on the entity size. Again, in large companies, employees suffered the least of decreased earnings in effect of pandemic. So the size shielded employees, and in small businesses, the hit was the hardest in the United Kingdom. Yes, so the evidence is mixed, but still the narrative is very strong. I want to give you, the interesting example, COVID-related example of this narrative differential between how we see small and medium-sized entrepreneurial companies and big business. So BioNTech Pfizer vaccine, yes, one of the two most successful vaccines, is a cooperation of a startup, research-based startup from Germany, and one of the largest pharma companies in the world. Yes, and if you looked at the time when the vaccine came out, it was very striking, the difference in how those two parties of this incredibly successful venture were portrayed. So on the left side, you had Dr. Ugur Sahin and Dr. Özlem Türeci on the cover of the New York Times, and it was mentioned how they are, and it's true, children of Turkish immigrants. They are a married couple. They founded that company in 2008. There was this highly positive. You can see even pictures even show you a lot. Yes, they are shown dressed casually, almost like your neighbor next door who really changed the world, and they did. But interestingly, on the other side was Dr. Albert Bourla, CEO of Pfizer, and at the very same time when Dr. Sahin and Türeci were kind of idolized for their incredible and undoubtful accomplishment, Dr. Bourla was actually subject to very negative press, which was revolving around him supposedly benefiting in some untoward way from a stock option that he cashed at the time of the vaccine rollover. Very little coverage was about the fact that Dr. Bourla is actually also an immigrant, a Greek immigrant, highly successful, worked for Pfizer for 27 years, including as global vaccine chief. So it's a very impressive story. He's not some sort of corporate hack. He is a medical doctor with a PhD who just went up in this research arm of Pfizer. The 5.6 million of stock sales, not an insignificant money, but you know, it is what it is, was approved in August as part of the so August 2020 as part of a predetermined sales plan, and it was simply cashed by coincidence at the time when the vaccine was all over, but it was pre-approved way before. His net worth is, I mean, he's not a poor man, but his net worth is 26.5 million. Why am I bringing it up? Because lost in the conversation was that at the very same week that Mr. Burla made 5.6 million for, you know, being part of this partnership, Dr. Sahim made $500 million. Yes. And his net worth is more than 4.5 billion. Yes, so like, you know, who is a big guy and who is a small guy? Yeah, I mean, and we see that Pfizer. It's not an accident that Pfizer was part of this deal. Pfizer now has developed by themselves this new pill, the drug. Yes, so there is a lot of the creative accumulation story. Using Schumpeter's word, to actually show us that, you know, these large companies have an important social purpose, and maybe the small entrepreneurial ones are sometimes overvalued. I want to point out that this is you know, the love of entrepreneurship and the constant prophecy of doom and gloom that unless Europe embraces American ideas of entrepreneurship and capital, the role of capital markets and venture capitalists, we will all be doomed and uncompetitive and will all descend into poverty, is plainly not supported by data. If you look at, I think, the most respected measure of well-being, which is called an Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index, IHDI, which is compiled globally by the United Nations. You know, the first, you know, you don't see the US among the top 10 or even top 13 countries, but you see a lot of European countries here. Yes. You know, you have Scandinavians, but you know, you have Germany at 10. You have even Eastern Europeans, post-communist countries, much higher. I mean, where is the US? I mean, you have Austria at 15, and US is at 28. So if you look at, you know, factors such as wealth, yes, GDP per capita, but also health, education, and inequality, Europe, with its, you know, sleepy, you know, model based on mid-sized family companies and big businesses, and maybe not as an exciting entrepreneurial scene, is not doing that bad. Yes, and I think that's why this new narrative. So there was always a disconnect between the fact that Europe is doing quite well, and that the narrative on this part was that we need to change things. Yes. So the takeaway, and then I'll ask Thomas. I'll let Thomas to ask question. Is there is no policy consensus on entrepreneurship, and there is less and less. And if you feel like you are protected from this new skepticism to entrepreneurship by the ocean, think again, because, you know, your progressive part of Democratic Party is very much influenced by European ideas. Yes, and this is a new European trend to question this this need to imitate US on entrepreneurship. Yes, policies can change in the future, and more uncertain world, as I showed, may limit entrepreneurial opportunities. The creative accumulation may become stronger than creative destruction in this new world. On your individual level, build scenarios. My startup without supportive governmental, in the US, both state and federal, help in Europe, both national and EU. My startup during another crisis, we teach you in the program about scenario building. Can you respond proactively? My new paper with a colleague about this, and take a critical view at your idea, because if you are beyond tech, no matter what entrepreneurial support you will have, you will find capital and you're going to succeed. Yes, I think the climate towards entrepreneurship will affect mostly the kind of less obvious idea, or less path-breaking ideas. Then it can actually make a difference. And the final point, what I hope this presentation showed you about CEU, which is that, like great American universities, we have certain principles that behind our research and teaching. We give you critical perspective. I started with it jokingly, but it's true, including on American business practice. We look at everything critically. We help you understand the bigger picture. I always say that a good executive MBA program does not only teach you how, it does, but in addition, it also teaches you why. Offers a variety of perspective. On the left, you see our award-winning entrepreneurial incubator, the iLab, which offers a completely different perspective, a much more traditional pro-entrepreneurial perspective than what I showed you. And we coexist at one institution because of the spirit of open society. We focus on what's practically relevant. And as I said, we don't only teach you how, we teach you why. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcie. I'm forwarding a question from the audience. How again are the entrepreneurship numbers calculated?
Yes, well, depending on which numbers are we talking about? Yes, if we are talking about in the most recent slide, sorry. Okay, let's go to the most recent slide. This one. Yes. So this is okay. So the index is called IHDI, Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index, and it's a mixture of per capita GDP, so the output of a given country, a measure of inequality, how unequal this output is distributed, measures of educational quality and length of education that people on average get, and health measures. Yes, and it's a standard since 2000. It's a standard way how UN sees development of countries. Because the argument is that if we just look at per capita GDP, especially not adjusted for inequality, we don't see much. Who cares that like a 1% of Americans get, all those billions of dollars? Yes, it doesn't tell us anything useful about well-being of an average American. So we need to create an index that takes into account what most people find valuable, whether they have good income and they can buy all necessities. Not surprisingly, Norway is the first. It's a very, very wealthy country. Yes, how equally this income is distributed in the society, whether people are in good health and have good life expectancy, and whether people have educational opportunities. So I think it's a pretty convincing index. Of course, no index is objective, but it's, you know, I think for some of our American audience, it may be a little surprising just how poor US is doing when you take all those measures. Yes. I mean, literally, you have my home country of Poland higher than the US on that index. Yes. Which, you know, has been a communist country 30 years ago. Yeah. So you know, so it's yes. I mean, again, what I'm saying, despite the fact that you have those numbers, as of today, the dominant narrative is still, let's imitate US kind of economic practice in this entrepreneurship sphere. I'm just showing you that because there are those underlying trends, and especially if you are convinced by my argument that the more uncertain world is not more volatile world is not going to be kind to a lot of small businesses, then, you know, you can start predicting, you know, what's the likely chance that this consensus about entrepreneurship is going to change over our professional career. Yes, and I think asking those questions, if you are an entrepreneur, if you depend on favorable tax environment or favorable regulatory environment or favorable all those, you know, even them you know, progressive policies like ACA, Affordable Care Act, which exempts small and medium-sized businesses. You know, if the narrative changes, and maybe it changes first in Europe and then it gets to the other side of the pond, then it can very much affect, you know, if you run a small business, it can affect you. And again, you don't come for an MBA program to just, you know, solve problems next week. We want you to start solving problems next week, but you have decades of career ahead of you and you need to understand big trends. So I think this is one of the potential trends, that the world becomes more, because of climate change and other factors, becomes more volatile, and governments sooner or later start realizing that it's easier and more efficient and more practical to support big businesses because they will deal with those challenges better. Yes, Chris.
You know, I think looking at the inequality adjusted HDI, I could imagine sort of splitting some key elements there. As you mentioned, sort of some public governance issues, including education, which, you know, would leave then kind of governance of the private market as, you know, potentially a separate issue that is more than made up for by the public governance issues. And so I'm thinking about, you know, competitive intensity in terms of entry and exit, and, you know, kind of market share structure in different industries and the effect of entrepreneurship there on maybe consumer welfare, and maybe it even goes to, you know, variety as well as sort of, you know, cost efficiency of various goods. And, you know, I believe you still have the kind of elevated level of unemployment, or kind of maybe lower level of total employment in the European countries, including some of the high HDI ones. And, you know, how much of that might be explained by insufficient entrepreneurship. The other thing that strikes me also is about maybe employee ownership, and, you know, how that kind of in itself, but also as kind of a vehicle to better welfare, is a advantage of smaller business.
no, great points. And some of those trends may, counteract those other. I didn't mention them mostly because everybody talks about those aspects. Yes, for example, high unemployment in Europe. Yes, and I wanted to show you a different perspective. Also, we are not talking necessarily about kind of policy logic, but more a political narrative logic. Yes, that's what I am saying. I'm not even arguing who is right here. Yes, I'm saying, look at the components of, look at pieces of facts and how they can be connected into a narrative that may be much more sympathetic to entrepreneurship than what you assume will always be a consensus. Yes, and the fact that, with all the things that you said, the US is still doing so poorly on so many of those well-being indices should give you a pause in assuming, kind of continuous intellectual dominance of American ideas. Yes, just like if you are, no longer, the best swimmer, then you will not be for long an authority in the swimming community. Yes, so I think, and you can argue that on other aspects you are very good and maybe better than the swimmers who are winning the medals, but still, at least one possibility is that since you are not on the top of the swimming ranks, your authority may wane over time. Yes, and I'm not saying this must happen, but I am simply saying that it's a possibility. And of course, the analogy is not perfect because we are talking about countries which have internal dynamics. Yes, unlike an individual swimmer. Yes. So the other point, that the other political dynamic that can happen is that within US, especially kind of left-wing progressives who are already kind of calling for democratic socialism and adopting a lot of European practice, will start getting responsive to these narratives from Europe. So since they are supported at least by some facts, yes, and start saying, what is currently, I would agree, still, an impossible thing. Yes, it's a no-go zone of challenging the, sanctity of small and medium-sized backbone, businesses in the US. I mean, 5 years down the road, if we get like climate crisis on top of pandemic, and those policies are also very expensive to support those small and medium size. So, it's also, there may be some political benefits of changing this narrative and doing more what, for example, Germany is doing, much more efficiently supporting, key, larger businesses. Okay, yes, Lenny.
Yeah, I just mainly have a comment or a couple of comments. I just wanted to say that I really think what you said, Marcie, about the experience of studying in Europe for someone who's American, which I'm speaking for myself here, coming from the US, going to study in Europe with an international cohort of peers, and then coming back to the States, or, starting an international career, changing locations, moving to another country for the first time. I really can't stress how just valuable that experience is for just educationally and also personally. I was in the full-time MBA program in 2011, 2012. And so that was, during the Euro crisis. And I just really value what I know about that experience and how I got to study it while being also introduced to so many European countries that, you know, and the case studies and everything we did in class. And obviously, like, my peers and my colleagues, like, learned so much about it in a real way, in a meaningful way. So I can imagine this post-COVID entrepreneurship or just productivity, you know, resource allocation. There's so many things that we all are going to have to face no matter what industry we're in, that I just want to put in a pitch that I think CEU is the perfect MBA to pursue at this time for anyone who's looking for just a deeper level of experience and part of that educational process. And then also just wanted to plug something from Tamash's initial slides. The very, very first slide of the whole presentation for this open day was about the value of an MBA. And, you know, how much value does an MBA have in today's market? And I actually have a story. Like, I actually was offered a new career opportunity today. And it came to me through someone I know, and their number one inquiry was, we need an MBA type. Do you know anyone, or are you available? And I mean, that was it. It was an MBA type. And that is how they described what they were looking for first and foremost. And 2 different emails I got that just put that out there. So I do want to say that, you know, for whatever it's worth, I mean, Marcie would be the first to say it's BS. You know, the certificate that you have, it doesn't, you know, it's just a piece of paper, but it does mean something. It is really valued in today's market. And sometimes you know, get opportunities that really just, it's a box that you have checked off, and the, you know, outside world really respects that and needs it and looks up to it still, and are excited to have someone on their team that has it, you know, especially people that don't have one. But the, you know, obviously, like, the education and the experience of, for me, going to CEU with such amazing professors and classmates makes me feel like, no, I actually do have something really valuable to offer. It's not just a BS piece of paper. It really has a lot of meaning, and I can contribute significantly. So I look forward to a new career change in this new post-COVID world, and I'll tell you guys about it later, but I just wanted to add those 2 comments.
Well, congratulations, Lenny, on that. I mean, you just presented the perfect transition to our final part of the open day, to the Q&A session. I have collected a couple of questions. Marcie, if you would like to help me answering those questions, because some of those questions better fit to your agenda, some of those questions better fit to my field of expertise. Let's start with the elephant in the room. What about the COVID situation? How are we dealing with COVID academically and logistically?
Well, first of all, we are in Vienna, so it's one of the most advanced city that has like the most advanced approach to COVID prevention. I'm going to be very straightforward here. If you want to attend on site, and unless you have a medical reason, you need to be vaccinated. We don't have here ifs and buts and wiggle room here. In addition, the city offers free PCR testing for everybody, including guests and tourists, which we do every second day as a matter of course. And that means that since the start of this pandemic, we have not had a single case during our MBA modules. And we had only one module since the start in March 2022, where March 2021, sorry, where literally the whole world was locked down, when we didn't have an on-site option. Imagine that. For all this pandemic, we had only one short module when we didn't have an on-site option. Every other module, we had participants on site. And we test, and we vaccinate, and we keep distance. We teach in very, very large classes so that we keep the distance. We have a great online option. We invested, hundreds of thousands of euro in kind of amping our technology here. But we still think you should come, and there is nothing like. And just because it's so rational here and so well organized here in Vienna, it's not only that we don't get sick, it's just we can have fun during those modules. Just because everybody is tested and vaccinated, you don't have this constant feeling at the back of your mind, like if I'm gonna get sick in a foreign country. Of course, you can get sick, and you'll be fine because we have, world-class public health insurance system here, which of course you need to buy your insurance as a non-Austrian citizen, but the infrastructure, the hospitals are world-class, and you will be taken care of. But we don't want it, and it has not happened to one person in our cohort since 2019, 2020. Yes. Everybody flies in and flies out safely.
I would like to take the next question. What are the application requirements, and what does the application process look like? That's easy. The formal criteria are as follows. We are looking for people with at least 8 years of work experience, of which at least 3 years of managerial or any kind of leadership experience. You're supposed to have a university degree of any kind of field of study. We do have people in the current program coming from the traditional business, with a traditional business background, but we also have artists in the program, and medical engineers and medical doctors, entrepreneurs. So any background, any field of study is fine. Of course, Americans don't need to present a proof of English because it's the native language. And you would need to present a selection of documents like a CV and a motivation letter and university transcripts and university diplomas. As far as the application process is concerned, it's straightforward. It starts on our website. So it's an online application where you create a profile, you upload your documents. Once you have submitted and completed your application, we will revise it for completeness and correctness. Assuming that you tick that box, of course, you will be invited for an interview. The questionnaire for the interview can be found on our website. We are fully transparent about this interview. So you can self-assess your strengths and weaknesses. You can prepare for this interview, and we're not playing any mind games in the interview. We just have this limited time in order to get to know you, and we want to get to know your leadership style, your motivation, and your personality. Assuming that you pass this stage, you will be presented to a admission committee, because we are handpicking our candidates, our participants, and based on their decision, you will receive a prompt admission decision only in a couple of weeks. As I said, we have a first come, first served policy, and I can promise that we will process your application only in a couple of weeks until you get your admission decision, because we know that executives don't have much time at their hands and they want a fast decision how they're gonna, plan their year. That's basically the thing about the process. In view of time, I would like to ask the last question to you, Marcie. What about exams and thesis?
Yes. So there are exams. However, there are no exams during the modules. Once you fly in, it's all about exchanging ideas, interacting with your colleagues, not like sitting in a room and writing something. Exams are taken online during exam periods of about 10 days. after the module. At the time, you choose your time within the 10-day period. It's 2-3 hours where you need to just focus on it and get it done. Most of the classes, however, have team projects, not exams. And so that's done in your support team. Both Thomas and Jason commented on the support team idea. There is no thesis. We have a capstone, and the capstone is about applying what you've learned at CEU Executive MBA into reality. And we think there are basically two aspects of that. One of them we call the strategic analysis component, which is the idea that we want you to apply your analytical skills that you've learned to solve a problem, write a business plan, review something, a practice or a marketing practice or an HR practice in your company, or for another entity or even a non-profit. And what we call the leadership component. And that's where we want you to show that you changed something in the world, mentor somebody, implemented a project. And so only two together give you the capstone. And that's our approach to thesis. Yes, you actually go into the world and apply your knowledge rather than writing a magnum opus that's going to gather dust on your shelf.
Thank you very much, Marcie. In view of the time, I would like to conclude this open day. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Thank you very much, Marcie, for your keynote. Thank you very much, Jason and Lenny, for joining us tonight. Thank you, Stefan in New York, for hosting us. Thank you, Chris, for joining us tonight. And thanks to all the on-siters and online participants for joining us tonight. Thank you very much. Good night.